And a very good morning as we enter hour 3 of Brian's Beat. As I mentioned to you before, we have in studio with me today State Representative Antonio F.D. Cabral. I actually saw the state representative last Saturday over at Kearney Academy. He was there for the Raise Up Massachusetts forum that they were putting on throughout the Commonwealth in order to talk elected officials into going along with their ballot question. Basically, the way that it's written, they want minimum wage at $15 per hour for everyone across the board, and they would also like to have paid family and medical leave for everybody across the board. Now, the legislature is working on a few things that are a little bit different, and one of the reasons for having Rep. Cabral in studio today is because he has worked on this legislation, he told me the other day, for about a decade.
Yes, that's true.
And first of all, welcome back. A long time since you've been in studio.
Well, I know. Thank you very much, Brian, for inviting me for a Saturday morning.
Yes,
nice,
early. I see you've got your coffee.
I got my coffee. I need usually 3 cups of coffee to get me going in the morning. This is my second one.
Well, good. So you went out and bought. Do you ever have one at home before you leave the house?
Absolutely.
Why don't you just take like a big thermos from home?
Most of the times I actually just get my own at home. Once in a great while, when I'm in a rush, I stop at Dunkin' Donuts or another place to buy either my second or my third cup on my way to work. But most of the time, it's actually it's at home. I make my own coffee.
And how do you do it when you're heading up to Beacon Hill? Do you take a larger cup than the one you have right now, or
sometimes I do. Sometimes if I need to stop at a place, I usually ask for a large. This is a small.
I'm going to ask, I know we weren't going to go down this particular road, but do you think when that train comes, if that train comes, you're going to take the train, or are you still going to drive?
Well, first let me tell you that the train is coming. You know, we've been working on this, myself and others, Senator Montigny, myself, and other legislators in this region we've been working for quite some time, as you know, to make sure that we finally going to get some commuter service to New Bedford, to Fall River, to Taunton, to the South Coast. Really, I mean, it's the only region of the state that really does not have, besides Western Mass, Springfield, for example, that doesn't really have regular service to Boston. I think it's crucial for us, and I think it's crucial for the economy of Massachusetts as well. It's not just for our economy in Southeastern Mass or South Coast, or New Bedford in particular, but I think it's crucial for the growth of the economy in Massachusetts. So it's coming. Now, the option that is before us, there are 2 options, right? One is what the administration is calling Phase 1, which is going through Middleborough. That will get us to Boston, or will get us the service quicker than the other route, so-called Phase 2, through Stoughton, the famous Stoughton route.
Well, you mean get us started quicker? Right,
get us started quicker, not get there quicker. Obviously, they're predicting about 91 minutes to 95 minutes.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
Longer than it takes for you to drive.
Lately, it's about equal to that, right?
Really?
Oh, yeah. It takes me some mornings, it takes me an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. The same thing on the way out, depending on the time, obviously. And it seems to me, on the last few years in particular, that it doesn't matter what time you go up, right? It's usually an average of an hour and a half to 2 hours. But a service, a commuter rail service, train service needs to be better than that, obviously. We all know that. To attract ridership, to be efficient, and to really give that economic stimulus that we need down here and Massachusetts needs going forward. So I think that will come in Phase 2.
You really think there's going to be a Phase 2 with? I know we weren't going to talk about this, but a Phase 2 that is going to have to go through so many types of environmental permitting. Is it really worth it?
Well, Phase 2, I don't think it's as the obstacles are not as great as people or some folks think. There are some environmental issues to be resolved, in particular around Easton in particular on the Hockomock Swamp, so-called, which used to have service going through there up until 1959 or 58 to 59. And I think that issue can be overcome. And if people really have the effort and put their will together, I think it can be done. It can be accomplished. The service was going through there before, and I think it can. Obviously, the environmental laws have changed since then,
big time,
and we have also to recognize those. But there are ways of meeting those environmental laws and still connect service through that route.
Well, I'll leave it at that because I wasn't planning on talking about it, nor do I want you to really get into it that much. But as we move forward, I don't know if we talk about the echelon of things where that train issue is compared to what you've been working on for a decade. Certainly South Coast Rail folks have been working on that a lot longer than 2005, 2006 in that area. This paid Family and Medical Leave Act, that I think you and I can agree that if the voters make a decision, whether I want it or not, whether you do want it because you've been working on it, that the voters of the Commonwealth are probably going to give it a thumbs up.
Oh, I'll agree with you. I think it is. All the polls indicate that. If this question is on the ballot this year, state election in November, I think it will pass. It will pass with significant plurality. I mean, the majority, I would say.
Are you willing to guess? I mean, I know it's fun to do this. 2/3 of the voters would say yes. Maybe 70%.
Maybe 70. I would say at least in the 60s.
Yeah.
At least in the 60s, they would approve this. Now the question is that the best way to make this kind of policy? Most of the times, the best way to make good, sound policy, a balanced policy in this area or almost any other area, is really through the legislature, where all the parties can negotiate, debate, and finally get a product that is balanced and that's good for both the individuals, for us as residents of the Commonwealth, and also for the business community and other interested parties. Now, if we can't get to a resolution, the ballot question will be in November, and the voters will have that ability and that choice. Having said that, as you know, any ballot question that gets passed on the ballot, any referendum, the legislature always has the option, if they choose to, or under the Constitution, the state Constitution, the legislature, as you know, can go in and modify or change or any ballot question that gets passed. Most of the times the legislature tries not to do that unless it's really unworkable piece of law, such as was the marijuana question.
Yeah, it was workable, but we're not going to go down that road.
But
let's talk about this one, though. Yeah. The voters say yes. Is there a reason for the reps and the senators to rework it, or can you live with it the way that it is? Well,
before I answer that question, I'm hopeful that we can actually reach an agreement in the legislature between the House and the Senate and the business community and Raise Up Massachusetts, the coalition that has been involved in this particular effort. If we can, and I think it looks like we might be able to do that. It will end up being a little different, slightly different than what would be on the ballot. I think it would be a much balanced.
Well, give me an idea. You've been writing this type of legislation for years, and it hasn't gone anywhere. What would you like to see different than what's on the ballot question?
Well, several things. I mean, as you mentioned, I have been filing legislation in this area since 2005, 2006. Legislative calendar, right? The session, each session, a 2-year session. And on the last 2 sessions, this one and the previous one, in addition to my legislation, the coalition Raise Up also has filed through other legislators a slightly different piece of legislation around this issue. I think the approach I think that is best is one that is balanced between the interests of the worker, but also taking in consideration some of the challenges that employers might face in dealing with this question. In the case that what I'm proposing is, as you know, this is a two-piece kind of insurance, if you will, right? You have the TDI portion, which is the temporary disability insurance, and then you have actually the paid family leave, right? Or paid family medical leave, which is the same thing.
Why are there two different ones if they're the same thing?
No, I'm saying paid family leave, usually that's what I call it. Some other folks call it paid family medical leave, but it's just a different term for the same objective or the same goal. TDI, as you know, is temporary disability insurance. Some states do have that already in place. Massachusetts does not. So therefore, in order to introduce or act on paid family leave, you got to have TDI in place according to federal law. So you cannot do one without the other. A lot of employers in Massachusetts offers TDI as a benefit package, as part of their benefit package to their employees, and that's good. A lot of employers already offer that, especially the bigger employers. So in my proposal, I'm saying, let's not disrupt the marketplace in that area. Right? Let's give the ability for the marketplace to continue going forward on the area of TDI, and for those employers that do not offer as part of their package, if they want to offer, they can, as long as it meets the standard that the legislation would create in terms of temporary disability insurance. And for those employers that do not offer as part of their benefit package, then they could offer through the establishment of the act of the law, through a fund that would be established and run by the state.
Now,
that's TDI.
What you just stated there seems fairly logical. The money is already there. The fund is already there. Why would, and I don't necessarily want you to speak for, but why is there opposition with the Raise Up Massachusetts folks?
No, there are no opposition in terms of the broad issue, both TDI and paid family leave. There is no opposition, and there's really no difference in terms of we agree in principle and in concept. It's just the nuances of the law that sometimes would differ. For example, Raise Up would like employers to carry all the cost of both.
Ah, okay.
See, the cost of TDI and the cost of paid family leave. In the proposal that I have filed for quite a number of years, it sort of divides up that responsibility between employer and employee, which is the case in all the other states that have adopted this type of legislation. For example, our neighboring state, Rhode Island, has had TDI for years. I mean, years, right? If you know, and that's employee-based. In other words, the employer does not provide any funding or does not cost anything to the employer. It is a payroll deduction for the employee with a cap. At a certain point, they don't put any more money into
like Social Security.
Right. There's a cap based on the salary, based on the number of weeks that you work. And then you have a benefit of up to 26 weeks, about roughly 6 months. If you get ill with any kind of illness that was not on the job, if you didn't get, this has nothing to do with getting injured on the job. That's workman's comp, right? Mm-hmm. This is in case you get ill. Let's say you have a particular illness that or an operation that you have to go through or anything like that. Then you can be out as much as 26 weeks and get a portion of your salary during that time. I think it's a great investment as someone who's working.
So Rhode Island does it as an employee contribution.
Right.
Massachusetts has it as an employer
right now. Right now, okay. Massachusetts does not mandate employers in Massachusetts voluntarily. A lot of employers
will pay into something like that.
They already offer something like that for their employees as part of their benefit package. What this law would do be the legislation before the legislature, or the question on the ballot would be to mandate that you got to have temporary disability insurance. In addition to that, would mandate as well that you have to have paid family leave. Temporary disability insurance is just for yourself.
I understand,
Right?
but I
Paid
think
family leave is for your family.
Well, what it comes down to is the way I'm hearing it. Rhode Island has it, and they make the employee pay into it. Raise Up Massachusetts wants the employer to pay into it, and what you are proposing is, you didn't say 50-50, but some form of split.
Yes.
Employer-employee.
Yes. TDI, so let's do TDI for short, but temporary disability insurance would be primarily an employer responsibility, since there is already, in many cases, they offer that. For an employer that has 11 or more employees, right? If it's an employer that has 10 or less, then it would be 50-50 on TDI, on temporary disability insurance. On the paid family leave side, it would be employee payroll deduction. As versus Raise Up Massachusetts, they would require the employer also to participate in that portion. So basically, it's a balance. It's a combination of responsibilities between the employer and the employee, and it's also capped on the paid family leave. As an employee, you through your payroll, you get a deduction on your to contribute to that particular fund, and then you have access to 12 weeks paid. If you're in case of a child, in case of a parent, in case of an in-law, in case of a spouse. You can then be out of work. You can take up to doesn't have to be 12 weeks all the time. Up to 12 weeks of paid leave. Therefore, you would be 60% in the case of the legislation that I've been proposing for a number of years. Would be 60% of your salary, up to capped at $1,000. In other words, some folks make more than $1,000 a week, right? But that would
okay. I'm thinking $1,000. That's not going to last a person a year. But okay,
No,
you're up to $1,000 a week.
a week.
All right, gotcha.
That's the cap, but it's 60% of your wages.
Right.
Just like workman's comp is 60% of your wages, right? As opposed to unemployment. Unemployment is 50% of your wages with a cap as well.
State Representative Antonio Cabral joining us in studio. We're talking about the paid family and medical leave ballot initiative compared to a bill that he has sponsored. And we'll take your calls at 508-996-0500. That's how you get on Brian's Beat, the weekend edition. And welcome back to Brian's Beat. Joining me in studio today is State Representative Antonio Cabral. We're talking about the paid family and medical leave question that is set to appear on the ballot. And what I found interesting is it seems in this particular case, the legislature, the ball is in your court. Because if the Raise Up Massachusetts folks don't seem to agree with what you do, they'll take their question and it will pass. And
That's
then
correct.
all of a sudden it comes right back around the corner to the legislature so you guys can tweak it or whatever you might want to call it.
Right. Yes.
Is that really fair to the voters?
Well, I think from my perspective, I usually the ideal is not to really make changes, but in some cases those changes are required depending on how the language was on the question. But most of the times I prefer not to do that. In other words, I prefer if the voters spoke, let's try to implement as best as we can whatever was on the ballot and the voters voted on. But in some cases, I think once you analyze the language that was on the ballot, the implications and how it gets implemented sometimes does require some tweaks. Most of the times, we have not done that in Massachusetts. In some cases, we have. In this case, let me just say that the question here is not. I support the idea. I support the concept. Sometimes it's the details, right? The devil is in the details.
All the time.
So I think myself and Raise Up Massachusetts and other interested parties, I think we are all on the same page in terms of the kind of benefits that we think workers ought to have in Massachusetts, like many other states already have. So we are on the same page. It's been really welcoming for me to have a coalition of that nature working on an issue of this nature, because in most cases, major pieces of legislation or major policy changes does require outside forces, meaning I say outside of the building in Beacon Hill, right?
I think it happens all the time, whether it's gun control or the Gun Owners Action League, just to bring up those two. The transgender bathroom, they all come from different places.
That's right.
And we'll get back into that in just a second. I'm going to head over to the WBSM newsroom. That is where Jim Phillips is at this particular time. Good morning, Jim. And welcome back to Brian's Beat. Joining me in studio is State Representative Antonio Cabral. We've been talking about the paid family and medical leave ballot question and his bill, which, there are minor differences, but I think if we were to ask the Raise Up Massachusetts folks, they would consider this particular part, the employer mandate to pay compared to the employee mandate to pay. They would consider that a big difference. In fact, if there's anyone from Raise Up that would like to talk about this, or if you're on my side of the street, they say, let's not even have this. They're few and far between on my side of the street.
Yes.
One way or the other, there is going to be some type of paid family and medical leave act. Would that be the proper word to use on the books here?
I believe so, and I'm encouraged by it. I think Raise Up Massachusetts has really brought the issue to the forefront as well, or brought it outside of the building, outside of the State House, and really they've done a lot of work. And over the years, people have shifted on this issue, starting with the President of the United States, the former President, Barack Obama, to the present President. On the last State of the Union, the present President, Donald Trump, also mentioned paid family leave, right? To the governors, previous governors, and candidates for governor. And so the opinion on this has shifted not only in the general public, but also in its elective leaders. So that's encouraging.
I suppose you keep on bringing it up several times. Eventually, you get more people on board with it. What was it like when you first brought it up in 2005, was it?
Yeah, it was a new concept for Massachusetts. Actually, California passed it on that particular time, 2005-2006 legislative session. So California was really the first state to implement paid family leave, not TDI, temporary disability insurance, but paid family leave. And it passed in the legislature. It was not a referendum, which is interesting. California likes to do lots of things by referendum, right? It was passed in the legislature with the support of the business community and labor. And it is solely an employee participation system.
Well, no wonder the business community liked it. But to me, there's a big difference between what you are proposing and what Raise Up. And to an employee, that's more money out of my check. To the employer, I got to pay more if they win.
But I think what I'm saying is, I think at some point we're going to end up in the middle. In the middle, that's where I'm at, right? My proposal is in the middle. There's both participation for both employer and employee. As an employee, as a working person, it's a great benefit. Right? We talk about helping families, helping children, helping elderly. This is the kind of thing that we can actually put in action that actually helps families, working families. In the participation as an employee in this concept would be around 0.1%. So it's pennies.
0.1% of what, please?
Of your pay, right? So let's say potentially, if you earn $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000, you contribute maybe $30, $50, $100, depending on your income, annually, and you're going to get a benefit of up to 12 weeks of paid leave to take care of the issues that you might have in your family, be with your child, or a birth of a child, or an adoption of a child, or if your parent gets ill and needs you to take a few weeks off to help them through, or your spouse, or an in-law. I think it's a tremendous
over
benefit.
Who can use the benefit or what qualifies for use as this benefit goes along. Who makes that determination? Here's an example.
Well, it's the employer, based on information provided by the employee, based on, in this case, would be based both on state and federal law. There's federal law on this already, and we would have to we cannot supersede, we could supersede, but we cannot undercut the federal law. Federal law right now allows, if you are an employer with 50 or more employees, and your employees can request 12-week unpaid leave
Is that what you do? You request? Do you have to use all 12 weeks at one time?
You don't. You don't.
Okay.
If you just need 6 weeks, then you just ask for 6 weeks or 8 weeks.
And can you take that additional 6 weeks? Example.
You can.
All right. I break my leg.
Yes.
Okay, and I can't drive my cab for 6 weeks.
Right.
I guess that would qualify me. I go back to work. And then
let's use that. You break your leg.
Yes.
That's you personally, right?
Yes.
You would be entitled to temporary disability insurance.
Okay.
You wouldn't tap into the paid family leave necessarily, okay? You could tap it if you needed more than the 26 weeks that TDI would offer, I would say. Because that's an injury that happened not at work, but outside of work, right?
No, not necessarily.
No, I'm talking about an injury that happens outside of work.
Okay.
You broke your leg at home. You fell down the stairs or whatever might happen, right? The temporary disability insurance would kick in for you.
I got you.
Not the paid family leave.
Not the paid family leave.
If your child gets sick or your parent or your spouse, now you cannot take temporary disability insurance, right? You have to take paid family leave in this case.
So am I to understand there's 12 weeks for both? So if you needed...
temporary disability insurance would be up to 26 weeks.
Up to 26 weeks.
Paid family leave.
60% of my pay with the cap of $1,000 up to $1,000 a week, up to 26 weeks.
Yes. That's on temporary disability insurance.
That's on temporary disability insurance.
Yes.
I can use 6 weeks at one time, and then if another freak accident happens, I can tap into that account again.
Yes, you can. That's the way it works on the other states.
All right. And, well, is that what your legislation says? And is that what Raise Up Massachusetts says?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, the differences between the Raise Up Massachusetts ballot question and the legislation that I've filed now for quite some time, as you said, slightly over a decade, are very similar. It's just where do we meet in the middle? Where's the middle, the compromise between the interests of the worker and the interests of the employer, right? And that's
the only difference?
That's the big differences, right?
Well, I guess then the question, and will you take some callers on this?
Sure.
Would you rather see this to be an employer mandate or an employee mandate? Because that's basically, or as Rep. Cabral is saying, it should be somewhere between 75-25, 50-50. Who would pay more, the employer or the employee? Well, if it's 75-25.
Well, in this case, the proposal would be at 50-50. The compromise would be 50-50 at this point, right? Even Raise Up Massachusetts, I think, would at some point, if it is to be done through the legislature, I'm going to say that they probably would at least entertain that discussion.
Well, they haven't so far, have they?
Well, well, right now there is actually an ad hoc committee working with all the interested parties, both members of the legislature, members of the business community, in particular representatives from AIM, the big business organization in the state, and folks from Raise Up Massachusetts. They're all at the table trying to get to that point in where everybody feels comfortable and they think it's a good compromise. What Raise Up Massachusetts has in terms of leverage is if they can get that compromise, right, they have the ballot question, and they will be on the ballot if they can't get to that compromise. I'm hoping that we can get to that compromise before we have to actually have it on the ballot.
Let's talk about that ballot question for a second. You and I both agree that the voters will say yes to it, okay? I think if you and I were talking prior to the big vote in November 2016, we would have said Donald Trump's not going to win. But Donald Trump did win. So what happens if the voters say no to the paid family and medical leave ballot question?
I mean, there's always a possibility, right? There's always that possibility. All indications, all polls that have been done on this question suggest
Hillary Clinton was going to win.
Well, not all the polls were as definitive as the polls are on paid family leave.
Well, I get it, but what I'm trying to do is, would the legislature then go back and say, wow, we thought it was going to pass, it didn't, and entertain a bill? Or are you going to look, well, the voters really didn't want this, and not move forward?
I think we need to move forward on this question. This is about helping families, working families. I think we need to move forward, and I think the public is already there. The public is there before even the legislature has gotten there, right? And usually in most questions, in most issues of this nature, policies of this nature, the voters are usually ahead of the curve. They're really ahead of the legislature, ahead of, or at the national level, ahead of Congress, right? So I think the voters are there. The general public is there. They understand the benefits of providing these kinds of opportunities for working families to really provide for their family and still be in the workplace and still have the opportunity to work, and their job being their job, even though they might be out for 12 weeks, their job is guaranteed in the sense that they have a job to come back to. That's the other important thing of this legislation.
And I get that, but what I'm saying to you, what if the voters do that surprise and they're not into this paid family, and maybe they're just leery about it? It wouldn't be the first time, and then you're going to go back to the table and against the will of the people, you would try to do some type of legislation?
I wouldn't consider against all of the people. I think it's up to folks like myself and others that believe on the issue that is crucial for working families. It's good for families. Everybody talks about
then pass it
helping,
now.
Everybody talks about helping families, but they do very little about helping families. This is really about helping families. People who sometimes you have a situation in your life, in your family, that you actually need some time off, and sometimes you got to. Right now, you got to choose between that need and that paycheck that you also need, right? All other countries, all industrialized countries in the world have these kinds of benefits.
But they're not the United States of America. They're not the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
It becomes important for leadership, right? This is about leadership, about being out there discussing the issues to educate the voters or to educate the general public and say, listen, this is important for all of us. So I think if they were to turn down the question, which I don't think they will, it creates many things that get done is by having folks, both elected officials or non-elected officials, sometimes non-profit organizations, other leaders in the community, to really be out there and provide leadership on the issues. And then the public will get there if they're not there. But in this case, it's actually the other way around. The public is there.
And I agree with you, but I have to bring it up because sometimes we think the public is there, and we found out in November 2016. Sometimes they're not.
It can happen.
It can happen. But if it does happen that the voters vote against it, then that should also be a clarion call to the senators and reps that, well, maybe people aren't into it. When was the last time you brought this type of legislation forward?
Since 2005, 2006.
No, I mean the last time, though. Since you brought it up in 2005, 2006, it didn't go anywhere.
No, it didn't, because it didn't have enough support in the building or even outside the building. People were not talking about it per se.
But, okay,
in other places in the country, there were.
No, the last time you brought it up.
Right now.
Oh, I'm sorry, the time prior to what's going on in 2017.
The last legislative session, I filed legislation.
And it didn't go anywhere, did it?
It gotten further than ever before.
Sure.
Right? It actually left the original committee that it got referred to.
Is that the first time for that?
That's the first time for that. It was actually, at that point, it was not just my legislation. It was a compromise already between the one that I had filed and the one that Raise Up Massachusetts had filed, or some legislators had filed on behalf of Raise Up Massachusetts. So it was already a compromise at that point. And the question, by the way, the referendum reflects some of that compromise already, because the first version of the Raise Up Massachusetts was very different than what the referendum actually is going to be. It was completely just employer, period.
Got you. We'll take a call?
Sure.
508 996-0500. That's how you get on to Brian's Beat today. In studio, State Representative Antonio Cabral. Hello.
Hey, Brian and Representative Antonio Cabral. How are you?
Very good. Good morning.
Excellent.
Good. Hey, do you see this as a because there's unscrupulous doctors out there, and which we've all seen, working the system, putting people into disability that aren't disabled. Do you see this as like another way to create a vacation plan for some people that are willing to live below the bar?
There is no evidence of that. I mean, right now you have employees that work for a company that has 50 or more employees already are entitled to up to 12 weeks of unpaid family leave. Right? That's actually federal law. And there is no evidence of that. I mean, obviously the employee, the worker has to submit paperwork, the necessary paperwork to their employer in order to qualify, and obviously has to be some. If you gave, for example, if someone adopted a child or someone had a child, both the wife or the husband are entitled, right?
But I see where the caller is coming from.
My wife and I had two kids. We went, back in the early '90s, and we had to deal with unpaid leave, and the reason for that is we need to get back to work. And so we made some decisions personally, but there are other people, and when the system is created around lowering the bar, there are people that are willing to lower the bar, and what ends up happening is people that are employers like myself we have to decide whether we can keep people because they're willing to lower the bar and get out of work on a regular basis and make it a lifestyle.
Well, I mean, there's always someone who's going to try to game the system, right? In any issue, but I think the evidence of how it plays out now is unpaid. Doesn't give that indication that families really take advantage in that way.
But it's unpaid. But if it's paid, it's different.
It could be different, but I think it's up to the employer. I mean, it's also the employer responsibility to make sure that the evidence of the need is substantiated.
But how do you go against the doctor? The doctor says he's got lower back pain and he shouldn't work. What does an employer do in that particular case? Well,
that's a good question. The doctor, obviously, at this point is the backup information, and there are, like the caller says, sometimes we have seen some abuses of the system that we have now. We have to work hard, both in particular the employer and the government as partners of the employer in this case, to make sure that doesn't happen, and we have to be vigilant about it.
I'm going to give you the last word on this, and we're not going to get into the gun part, maybe another time. But what do you think needs to happen now? Do folks that want this paid leave need to encourage lawmakers? Lawmakers need to talk to the public before they go to vote in November 2018. What is the next crucial step in your world with this paid family and medical leave?
The next crucial step is to see if we can get to a compromise by the middle of May, according to the Constitution, the state Constitution, and the legislative process. Whenever there is a referendum before us, if the legislature does not act by a certain date, in this case is around the middle of May, I forget the exact date now off the top of my head, but it's around the middle of May, then the voters or the residents or the organizations, in this case the coalition of Raise Up, then needs to go out again and get an additional set of signatures, right, for the referendum to be on the ballot. They already did the initial collection of signatures that qualifies them to be on the ballot. If the legislature does not act by, let's say, around middle of May and passes, or at least takes the first step to pass legislation, then they have to go out and get more signatures, and they will be on the ballot.
All right. Antonio Cabral, State Representative, thank you for coming into the studio today and joining us on Brian's Beat.
Brian, thank you for inviting me, and don't be so formal. You can call me Tony.
All right. I'm going to call him Tony. Tony the Tiger. All right. No, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.